Welcome to Tales About the Table, where we explore the stories, challenges, and creative chaos of TTRPGs, but mostly D&D. I'm Elijah.
I'm Jack.
And I'm Josiah. Together, we discuss the art of DMing, character building, and making unforgettable moments at the table.
Each episode, we break down a different aspect of tabletop gaming, sharing our experiences, lessons learned, and maybe a few funny failures along the way. Whether you're a seasoned DM or you're just rolling your first set of dice, there's always more to learn about collaborative storytelling.
Sometimes we talk about how to play TTRPGs, the rules, the setup, and everything in between.
Sometimes we talk about how to be better people and communicators, and therefore, better players.
And sometimes we talk about our own misadventures and the lessons that we've learned from the worlds we've created.
But most importantly, we love telling great stories together.
So pull up a chair and join us as we share another of our many tales about the table.
Hi, and welcome back to Tales About the Table. I'm Jack, joined as always by Josiah and Elijah. And today, we're going to be talking about character optimization again. Specifically, last time we talked about, kind of building some characters and how this is, something that, we often like to start with the stories. We really care about building really in-depth characters that fit with our worlds and drive this story forward. But the way your character engages with the world is done through the mechanics. And that is, in a lot of ways, kind of the base of optimization. It is having a good understanding of the mechanics so that you can better interact with the world. And so I don't want to scare anybody away. A lot of people see optimization and be like, oh no, that destroys D&D. It really doesn't. Optimization is kind of the reasoning behind the choices you're making. Yes, you can really dive into optimization and break a game world because you build a wizard that casts simulacrum on itself, and that simulacrum casts it, and so on and so forth, and you get a bunch of clones of yourself, and you completely destroy the DM's world and plans for a good story. But that's not good optimization. You've optimized yourself out of a game and fun and maybe even friends. So really don't do that. There's really a place to approach it with a cooperative attitude. The best optimization is the one that helps everyone else to also have fun at the table, but also gives you a character where you are excited to engage with the world around you. I would also just kind of say here at the beginning, D&D's kind of easy. It can be harder depending on the DM and what he's doing and this and that. But you don't need to do this. Pretty much any single class build that you do in D&D is gonna be somewhat viable. There are a few subclasses, although not really in the 2024 edition, mostly in some of the older stuff that you can grab that are gonna feel pretty bad. The alchemist, artificer, which for some reason some people do argue for that being okay. That one's pretty rough. It's got an okay level 3 ability and then basically nothing for the rest of its career. And its level 3 ability costs a ton of resources that the artificer doesn't have and things along that line. And that was something that it's a subclass that makes you kind of feel bad, especially if you were playing at a table with another artificer. They're going to have so many more options to engage the world and abilities to do what you want to be good at, that it's oh man, it feels kind of bad when you're playing that character. And that's kind of what we're getting at here with optimization. Yes, it can be about doing a lot of damage. Yes, it can be about really kind of wowing people in your game world and rolling a lot of dice and things like that. That can be really fun. But that's not the main point of optimization. The main point of optimization is helping you to tell the story you want to tell. And what I kind of mean by that is specifically if you are like, I'm playing somebody who wants to be the greatest swordsman to ever exist among the pirates, and so I am going to, start out as this fighter, and by the end of my career, I'm going to be the strongest swordsman in all the land. And, you take champion fighter, let's say, which is a good subclass, but kind of your baseline. And somebody else in the party is like, I'm going to play also a fighter, and I'm doing this other thing. And they take Battlemaster fighter. And you guys hit, level 11 or whatever, and you're supposed to be this incredible fighter, and the Battlemaster is just completely showing you up. Or, say they played Gloomstalker, and you're this champion fighter, and you're supposed to be the best swordsman, and at level 5, they're completely outshining you. And it's like, man, that feels kind of bad. The class fantasy, the idea I had in my head, is not what is coming out at the table. And I think that is where, yes, the DM can help. Yes, he can step in and do some stuff, but this is where optimization can help. It helps you tell the story that you want to tell through the mechanics that you engage with the game. So last time we did something very similar. We did a little bit of a case study, a little bit of a hands-on experiment with building characters from scratch using some ideas that I've had. And this time we're going to do that similar thing, but building mechanically those characters. If you realize last time, we didn't even pick classes. We didn't pick, any sort of like, spell progression or
we didn't pick
multi-class
a species
ideas.
Anything.
We didn't talk about the mechanics at all. We built characters. And now I want to talk about how can we bring those characters to life and allow them to engage with the world around them through the mechanics. So, if you hadn't, if it's been a little while, since you watched the last episode, Elijah, can you give us a quick recap of the character that you made in the last episode?
Yeah, I was building a character that really cared about writing and telling awesome stories of heroes. One of the things that we talked a lot about was the beliefs that we had, and so I really believed that like destiny is set, and the great people in this world are like destined for the things that they're doing, and that by extension then great change in your life isn't really worth pursuing. I also mentioned that my character was a coward, and I am really bound to my library that I kind of run in the local village, and kind of gave my DM some things to play with there. So
I was going to burn it down in the first couple of sessions. So
exactly.
You'd have this Bilbo moment of needing to leave home.
Yeah.
So
Jack is pro burning the Library of Alexandria. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen.
I would not say that about the Library of Alexandria, but in this, fantasy world that we made
of course,
yes, I definitely would burn that.
No, that's my character's name is now going to be Alexandria. So like just to make it so that you are in fact required.
I'm burning Alexandria's library. You're right. I like it. All right, Josiah, give us a very quick recap of who your character was.
Yeah, so my character, sort of the core driving piece for my character was that he wants to be remembered. He does not want to be forgotten. His parents are nobodies. He had this great hero that made a big impact on him, and then he went away and died, and it seems like nobody remembers this hero, and he said, I'm not going to let that happen to me. And so everything that he does from this point forward is going to be to the end of trying to be remembered. And he has this sort of idea that perception is reality. Whatever people think, however people view me, that is what is true. So it doesn't even really matter if I actually do anything worth remembering, as long as people like remember me or even remember me having done something. It doesn't really matter. And then we talked about what he sort of needed to come out of that, and we sort of talked about how like he what he needs is to see that he is enough without
Hmm.
doing more, without needing to become something different,
Yeah.
and then maybe coming to some sort of conflict with being remembered is maybe not the most important thing, and that he can go somewhere else, and that
Mm.
it's okay to not necessarily control everyone else's perception of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. So kind of bringing both those characters back to mind and saying, okay, remembering kind of what you want to do with some of them, maybe some of the arcs you want to go through. Again, potentially, we let the game kind of play. We don't try to force that to happen. Um, but what, and I'm going to give you kind of a list here. What mechanically do you think that they're going to be good at, your character? And I think this is kind of the place where I start often with my optimization, is what do I want them to be good at? Do I want them to be really good at single target damage? They just really are good at taking down a single guy. Do I want them to be an AoE blaster that really does a lot of multi-target damage? Do I want them to be excellent in social encounters where they just really can wow the socks off of whoever they're talking to, or be really, get really high rolls there? Do I want them to be a skill monkey? Any skill check the DM asks for, I'm going to succeed on. Do I want them to have really good defense and shore up all those weaknesses to make sure that they can, really defend their party? Do I want them to have really good utility outside of combat, to sneak or teleport or have telepathy or things along that line? Do I want them to buff other players? I really see them as somebody who is like bolstering the other players at the table, maybe debuffing the enemies, maybe throwing out a lot of control spells. I'm the wizard who's going to just completely shut down one or two guys on the battlefield, or throw out a big hypnotic pattern and stop everybody in their tracks. So what is the fantasy that speaks the most to you about this character? There are other things even outside of that you can be good at, but that's a short list of, I think, the ways that we most typically engage with the game and with combat and social encounters.
Yeah. Okay, so as I think through this character, coming from, again, from this from the like the story part of things, and then it's going to bleed into the mechanics for me. Um, I think my character is going to be very motivated by like the big flashy like stuff, because that's gonna like all of this is perception. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
it's gonna be like, oh, I want the big flashy. I think it's probably gonna be spells. You want like the big flashy
Yeah.
spells. I really think I'm gonna lean away from my character, like getting a lot of their knowledge of how to fight from their background, and more of, okay, I'm starting from this point. I want to be remembered. Now I'm gonna learn from there how to do all of these things. And so maybe he's newer to magic. I think I am gonna lean into the magic track.
Mm.
But then I think I want to do probably more single target damage is what I'm thinking. I want to be able to like go kill the giant thing. I want to kill the dragon, because that seems like a big deal. And then part of it, like I do think that social encounters are going to be very important to my character as well. Like
Mhm.
you want to make that impact, so it's kind of leaning in that direction.
So
It's
if you
gonna
had to
be,
rank
yeah.
those one, two, three, you have magic user, you have single target damage, and you have social encounters.
Mhm.
Well, magic user isn't really a goal,
Right.
but between social encounters and single target damage, how would you rate those two?
Um, hard to say how I'm gonna rate them, because it's hard to. They're both critical. If I can't do either, it'll be it'll be unfortunate. I'm gonna say probably more social encounters, actually, because realistically, if it's more about perception than what I actually am doing. I can come in here and last hit, and that's fine. I don't technically need to do a ton of damage
Gotcha.
as long as it seems like I'm doing a lot. So the social
Mm.
encounter is definitely going to be a big thing for this.
Okay. All right, Elijah, before we move on and start, diving into that a little bit, what's your character? What are they wanting to focus on?
Yeah, I feel like I really want to be a skill monkey. I want to be just able to do a lot of things. I think I would also kind of lean into the um, I'd probably lean into some of the social encounters. But I definitely would put more of an emphasis on like performance here, as like my big thing is like I want to learn how to tell good stories, and to like, hey, what is, I very much envision this character like trying to write out these kind of um the, these great stories and these songs of heroes and things like that. And so, yeah, I definitely think. Um, but for my character, and kind of like Josiah said, leaning into the story and getting the mechanics out of it, I think like, yeah, I've worked in a library and I've read pretty much all the books that have come into my library, and so I have, I dabble in a little bit of everything, and then I'm not like reliant on just one skill, but I bounce around to different things. So
Gotcha. Cool. Um, all right. So both you guys kind of have a direction now that you're trying to head. Um, and for the sharp listeners who've been listening at home, you guys probably realized, wow, you've done a lot of work and you still haven't chosen a class. And this is about the time where I would start looking at, okay, what class do I want to play? I have a good idea of the character, some of his motivations, their wants, their needs, if she is, who she kind of is. And there's this place where it's like, okay, now taking that forward, having an idea of how I want to engage with the mechanics and gameplay of D&D. I'm going to build a class. What do I want this to look like? And there's a couple options when you come to this. Most campaigns will start between kind of levels 1 and 3. If you start around that place, you're probably not doing a lot of multi-classing. Sometimes people will. And we'll kind of touch on multi-classing as we go forward. But for right now, we're just going to assume that it's kind of a single, class character, and go from there. We'll talk, maybe we'll have like a segment about multi-classing and how that looks closer to the end. That's a little more complicated, and we honestly, depending on how long this episode goes and how much we do, we might do a whole nother episode just on multi-classing, because there's a lot to unpack there, and good rules of thumb,
all good stuff
when you're coming to engage with that. But for right now, we're just going to try and engage with, we'll call it kind of simple optimization, where you're not trying to do all these crazy puzzle pieces and put them together. You are just trying to take your core concept and turn it into something that is fun to play at the table. So, that being said, what classes are speaking to you guys? And if you're truly like a brand new player, I know we're not always the most accessible to super new players, as we have gotten some of that feedback as our episodes are coming out. But I will say that if you're like a brand new player, you can worry a little less about optimization. Hopefully you have somebody in your group who can just kind of walk you through some of this. I know I'm running a campaign right now, and for a couple of the really new players, I've kind of just handed them some builds, partly because they wanted that. If they had expressed interest in figuring it out themselves and wanting to do that, I would have totally backed off. But it was pretty clear they're like, I want to play something powerful, and I don't have the time or know-how to really figure out how to build that. And it's like, totally, I can help you with that. I can give you something that's going to be strong and powerful, fit the class fantasy that you want, and I have the time and effort that I can put that in on the side.
Jack actually said, "I do this for fun." So this is what I want to do with my free time, is just build more characters and super powerful builds. So yeah, here you go.
Totally. So that being said, let's talk about what character classes appeal to this fantasy. And if you don't throw out some that I think could fit in there, I'll throw those out after you guys talk. But what is the, like, we'll say top 2 or 3 that you're really like, I could see this really fitting with what I'm going for?
Are you thinking full class, or are you thinking like class and subclass?
We'll start with just class. Let's pretend you're starting at level 1 and we're using 2024 rules. You won't get your subclass for a few more levels. So let's just start with the base class, fantasy.
Yeah, I think there are definitely different options I could go in. Like, no matter what you're doing, you can always heavy on more things and lighter on other things. You can sort of be like, well, I'll make this an aspect of my character through feats or through background, or I'll do this differently, or I'll dip into a subclass to get this aspect of things. So it doesn't all have to be through the class and different things. So like I kind of mentioned, I'm big on social encounters. I think it's going to be important, and then I want to be I kind of like the flashy aspects of things. I think are important to me, and then also just doing a lot of single target damage. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. I think when I originally built this character, one of the things I was thinking through was just like, kind of feels like fighter makes sense for who he was, because he's like if I'm gonna go be a hero, obviously I'm gonna need to know how to fight or something along those lines. That's gonna be the bigger, like the main thing he's gonna think of are these characters who are like going out and doing battle and a lot of things. So that makes a lot of sense. But I think like as I look more at this and I'm thinking, okay, well, how do I do social encounters? How do I, do the big flashy things? Wizard also makes a lot of sense of just like, okay, I want to do a bunch of, I got all these flashy spells. They're gonna do a lot of things. If you wanna change the world, you're probably gonna do it through magic, not through hitting something with a sharp stick. So that makes sense to me. And then,
Don't let your dreams be dreams. Go hit the whole world with a sharp stick and prove him wrong.
Yeah, good luck with that. Turn that world into your mallet.
So as you're going here, you threw out a couple of good options. Interestingly, not at all the options I would have thought for this character, but good options.
Yeah, I leaned into social encounters. The first I originally said.
Yeah, I know. You were like, I want to lean into social encounters. I think a fighter or a wizard. I was like, dude, but neither of those two guys are charisma forward, characters. Yep. So this is good, though. I actually really appreciate that you came to this. If you are like, man, I really want to play one of those two characters, can make it work, but you are trying to shove a square peg into a round hole. With your original statement of I want to be good at social encounters, and that's kind of my main goal, you probably want to start with a charisma forward class. And what we mean but when we say that is, bards, sorcerers, paladins, warlocks all have charisma as either their primary or main secondary, kind of dual ability score that they're using. And so I would probably recommend, if you want to be good at social encounters, and that truly is your character's first goal, that I would start with one of those 4 classes. You can make other classes work. The Swashbuckler Rogue is a really fun and even kind of flashy option that we should consider here, that is more charisma forward, and you're going to be able to get expertise in certain skills, which means you're doubling your proficiency bonus. And so that is going to really help you to also have that charisma forward facing character. And there
DM, can I be a fighter, but I use my charisma stat for all of my attacks? Is that
No, because that's a
No.
warlock ability, which you can
could
actually
be a
get as
warlock and
early
do
as
that.
second level. Like, that's not.
Yeah. You can do that as a warlock. In fact, I think you can get it with first level because you can take Pact of the Blade as your first level
2024.
invocation.
Oh, can you?
Now, but
Wow.
you can do that with warlock. That is a really fun option, and I think you could have a lot of that. Really is going to open up some more questions about your character and who they are. I would recommend for your character, if we're being simple, if we're not trying to really do something crazy, and I'm honestly, we could do one simple version of this and one crazy version of this,
ridiculous one.
because we are trying to workshop
Right.
this here. So honestly, let's do that. Let's do one simple version.
Yeah,
I would
real
say
quick.
pick between the warlock and the paladin for your simple version.
Okay.
Flashy spellcaster,
Yeah.
you know, that type stuff. What were you gonna say?
Real quick, I wanna point out that like the reason that it's important to pick a character that has that like charisma as one of their base or like forward moving stats is because it's really difficult to be optimized and play a multiple ability dependent character. Meaning, like, if you are trying to be good, if you are trying to have high stats in charisma, in intelligence, in dexterity, in strength, you're like, wow, I need high stats in all four of these categories in order to be like decent at any of the things that I'm trying to do. You're really gonna struggle to do all of those different things. So I could play a fighter and then put all of my stats into charisma. Well, now I'm not strong enough to actually do anything in combat, or or I could be a wizard and put all of my stats into intelligence. You can do other things, and you're gonna struggle. In the same way, I could lean into being a fighter, put all of my points into dexterity and strength and all of these things, and it's like, well, now I have either a 0 or a +1 in charisma, but I'm big on social encounters. It's like, okay, well, you're gonna struggle actually in social encounters if you haven't put the thing into it. So that's kind of why we're leaning in that direction. So
yeah,
just wanted
that is a very good
clarify that. That's
clarifier.
helpful.
Sometimes I forget what would be common knowledge there and not. But yeah, multiple ability score dependent, like
We're mad.
it's often referred to as mad. And it's like, you don't want to be mad. You don't want to have all these things that you have to put into. And when we do talk about some multi-classing at some point, that really plays in too. There are a lot of classes that have a prerequisite on the ability score you're using. So, for example, if he was a paladin and wanted to multi-class out of paladin into another class, he has to have at least a 13 in strength and at least a 13 in charisma. And so if he wants to play a wizard, he then will also have to have at least a 13 in intelligence, and you really probably shouldn't be dumping your constitution. So now 4 out of the 6 ability scores you have to have at least a 13 in. And that's a lot. You're going to end up with just a bunch of ability scores all over the place. And 13 isn't a very valuable number. You're not getting your +2 in that. You're getting just a +1 across the board. And you're going to feel, your character is going to feel rough at times if you do that.
And we can talk about how we roll stats later.
Yeah, I was going to say. And it's also worth noting that, like, when it comes to Josiah rolling stats, not likely that he's going to get that many amazing numbers.
I will say we definitely end up having a little bit higher stats at our table because we don't do point buy, we don't do standard array. We end up rolling for stats.
Yeah, it is worth noting, like, if you are doing
well.
point buy or if you are doing standard array, like, it will be even harder for you to optimize here. And so, like, there is even more benefit to, hey, I am really good at, I am just going to lean into my charisma. Awesome. I know that I have a high stat in that. I don't need anything else.
Yeah.
I can kind of make it or
if
whatever
I ever
stat.
Played at a table that was like, no, we only do point buy or standard array, I would be like, okay, I'm going to make sure that my character really only cares about like one ability score. because I typically like to do a couple of feats. I find that they round out my character. And so I want to do something where my character isn't going to fall behind everyone else because I got to be doing these ASIs, ability score improvements, on a bunch of things I don't care about ultimately, but I'm trying to multi-class or whatever. So going back to what we were talking about, I think that was a good side tangent, but to clarify some things.
Yeah.
But between, I would say, this character wanting to be flashy, wanting to be social encounter forward, wanting to be a spellcaster, and wanting to do single target damage, there are two classes that fit that to a bill, and they are Paladin and Warlock.
Yep.
Both have really interesting, potential for story elements. There's even a Paladin subclass called the Oath of Glory, which you can't get much more on the nose with what you're trying to do there.
No, totally fine. But I'm not going to go in that direction. No, yeah.
I was going to say, first, though, pick one of those two, and then we'll go in a crazier direction.
Gotcha.
Because I do think we should do two different types of builds.
Yeah.
You have a tendency to make very unique builds when it comes to
No. I meant I'm not going to go the Oath of Glory. I am going to go Warlock.
Okay. Totally
because I do really like the story elements. I think as I think about this character, he's going to be like, I want to do the flashy. Obviously, that means magic. Well, I'm not a magic user. How do I get magic? And he's going to go on this and going the Warlock route of like seeking out some sort of path to get you magic. Some sort of making a pact with someone or something. In order to get that magic makes a lot of sense, I think, for my character of figuring out, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to lean into that. And maybe I found a Warlock who was super socially adept and did have some of this magic. And leaning into the cantrip magic, I think just makes sense. Cantrip caster.
Gotcha.
Really,
so you want to be
flasher.
more like an Eldritch Blaster, or do you want to use a weapon? Because you can do cantrips now and use True Strike as a way to use a weapon and kind of still use your magic.
Yeah, I don't know that I need to lean into being a full cantrip caster for sure. I'm just thinking more along the lines of like being able to cast cantrips and doing that is pretty flashy, and so that feels
for sure
right for the character. But
cool.
But the fight, being able to deal a lot of damage, I think is important too. So it might end up being more martial. We'll see.
I do think if you're going single target damage, you can do okay with just an Eldritch Blaster Warlock. You can go Pact of the Blade. You're going to get Eldritch Smites. You can do quite a bit of burst single target damage.
Yep.
Is it the best use of your spell slots? Maybe not.
Yeah.
But like I said at the beginning of this video, D&D is kind of easy. You don't need to be perfectly optimized to make this work.
Yeah.
And so all right. So you're leaned in more Warlock.
Yeah.
What is maybe just a secondary thing that you'd said kind of fighter or wizard, but what's a unique way that you could have built this character? What's a unique direction you could have gone that still gives you the charisma forward that you're wanting?
Yeah. I think going the there's a lot of different routes. I do think one way that I could do it, rather than saying he starts from this goal and moves forward from there, it would be to go more to put it into his background of being this is what he wants to do. However, he grew up on a farm. He is just this burly kind of guy who just works on the farm, and he's a barbarian. That's what he is. And it's okay, we've gone a wildly different direction, and we're gonna have to break left turn in order to get this character moving in the right direction.
I will say, I was thinking it would be very fun to play this character as a barbarian, though. That I just want to be remembered, and to get angry about it at certain times would be super, super interesting.
Yeah.
And I definitely think too, you could play that. Barbarian was also the one I was kind of hoping you'd go in, partly because it gets an ability when it rages to add, I think it's level 3 here, I was looking it up, that it's going to be able to add its it gets to add its strength modifier to intimidation.
Yeah.
And so you have
Remember
this
me.
weird back door into a charisma, like you will be
Let's
good
go.
at intimidation. And I think that that's kind of interesting. You could play that character, like that really is going to guide and shape your character. You probably aren't, you're going to lean as much to being socially, built and being really good at that. You're going to be okay at it. And you're definitely going to be really good at single target damage. Barbarians are really good at that. And you still are going to have your flashiness. The rage is definitely going to be a very loud and proud mechanic at the table. You will see
I'm a WWE fighter.
Exactly.
He's got mad again. Let's go. It's going down now.
No, but really, like, you definitely can take this character in that direction too. And I'm glad that we kind of looked at an alternative there. It does, change his priorities, and that's why I at the beginning was like, you might want to play a warlock or paladin, because that best fits the priorities you described. But if you want to do something more unique, if you're like, no, I really want to lean into, single target damage more, and I still want to be able to be, socially adept, barbarian can be a really fun thing. Having that pretty strong intimidation check, and the barbarian also, you're going to be a little multiple ability score dependent if you're trying to throw charisma on top of that. But if you just really focus on your strength and your constitution and a little bit in dexterity, and whatever you have left, put it towards your charisma, like, you'll have a good character, and you'll be socially adept enough. And like you said, kind of with your background, you can take some proficiencies that are going to help get you started in the right direction. All right, we're going to pause there with that, and we're going to hop over to Elijah and his character. Elijah, what you had said, skill monkey as kind of something you really wanted to be good at. What classes are speaking to you? And we'll do the same thing that we did with Josiah, where we'll say, if you really want to be a skill monkey, you also want to be a storyteller, and good at performance specifically, the obvious choice is bard. A strong second is rogue. Those are kind of your two obvious classes. I'd ask you to maybe pick one of those, go in the generic direction, and then maybe something unique.
I was definitely going to say bard is the kind of simple, like we even talked about after we finished recording our last episode. We kind of were like, yeah, I feel like we just made like a really strong bard there, and it was like, yeah, that, and I remember saying, even I was like, yeah, I didn't want to go bard if I was like playing this character, but it just is because it's too predictable, but also it's very predictable. It fits all of the things that I would want out of this. And so bard would definitely fit. And so I was thinking of bard for, if I'm going we'll say the safe route. One of the really interesting ones for me, to me, would actually be, for my kind of a little bit more out there, is actually paladin, for this character, which going, I know a lot of the subclasses pretty well, and so one of the things about like the Oath of the Ancients paladin is that they preserve art and laughter, and so like just like there is this like great appreciation for these beautiful things, and so I very much was like, it would be super fun to like go a paladin route, for my kind of a little bit more out there of like taking this in a different direction, for my character. The other one that I also looked at was barbarian, of that it would be super fun to just be like, no, I get really angry, and when I'm angry, I'm good at a lot more things, which I just think would be very much like, I'm an angry librarian, which is
Yeah. That's interesting that you did Oath the Ancients. I like that. I definitely was thinking when you said Paladin, I was like, oh, Oath of the Watchers would be, like you're a
yeah.
librarian. You're like, my job is to protect this knowledge and to preserve it. But
2014.
yeah, that is an older subclass. It's not one of the newer ones, but that one was kind of the one I thought you were going for sure. I do love that idea. I like us doing these two kind of builds. You can see that there's an easy and a pretty common one that often will fit pretty closely with what you're wanting to do. If I came to the table and I was like, I want to play a knight in shining armor, it's like, great, you can be a paladin. They literally, are taking the oaths similar to King Arthur's court, and they're trying to be chivalrous and good. And that's an interesting story to explore. If you came to the table and you're like, ooh, I really want to be, that Conan the Barbarian, I am, strong and mighty and do all this stuff. And it's like, you can kind of do that with a bard or even a rogue of sorts and things like that. And your class fantasy, the idea that you want, often can be pretty easily found within the classes of D&D. And you can choose something that you often want to be kind of good at. And optimization is often about choosing one thing in particular. Don't come at this and say, oh man, I want to be, the best at social encounters and the best at doing damage and have the best defense and be able to do all the control things and be a really good skill monkey. And it's like, okay, even you can build those builds. They exist in D&D. I can build a character that is really good, better than normal at all those things. But even if you do that, you're probably going to overshadow your party. Like, there's a place where it's like, it's cool to let other people be better at things than you.
Yeah.
And it's fun for people to have the things they're good at. And it really stinks. I think the reason optimization is important is because it really stinks when you come to the table and you've made that decision of, I want to be a really good skill monkey. And then, the fighter using his, ability, he's got like a new ability that allows him to add to his skill rolls. And he, is a Eldritch Knight fighter and hits level 7, and it can cast improved ability or whatever it is, enhanced ability on himself, and starts absolutely blowing you out of the water when it comes to any skill check.
Yep.
And you're like, man, this stinks. I built my character to be good at skill checks, and this fighter who does way more damage than me in combat and is way tankier than me is also better at skill checks than me.
Well, you might be better at me at combat, but you just wait till we have a problem in the social encounter. That's where I'm going to shine. Oh, I was wrong. Actually, he shines also. He's just a better person than me. Why am I here?
And yeah, you get this feeling of like, man, they just do it all better than me. Okay, that kind of stinks. And you can tell fun stories even through that medium. D&D is so flexible and fun. You can tell the story of kind of grappling with an older sibling that's better than you at everything and finding your place in the world. That's a fun story to tell. And you can lean into that if you ever find yourself in that position. But if we're being honest, it does kind of stink. And it kind of stinks, especially when you had a character concept that is now being broken because of that. Your character was supposed to be the best sword fighter ever, or trying to become that, and they're clearly not. They're never going to overtake this other character in the progression and everything. And so that's where this optimization becomes important.
Right.
So let's take it just a little bit of a step farther. I'm not going to have you build out, levels 1 to 20, but we want to have a solid idea of where you're headed. So let's start with the warlock. You are building this warlock. You have a couple of decisions to make. You want to do single target damage. Warlocks can be good at single target damage. Typically speaking, to do that, you want to go more with like sword and board. And if you're going to do that, specifically, you're going to need to shore up your defenses, because if you are in melee, your character's going to go down a lot as a warlock. It is going to be hard to keep them up. So you have a couple of options with that. There's a couple of fun subclasses that can kind of fix your issues there. The Hexblade and the Fiend are the two that come to mind for me. The Fiend Warlock is going to give you temporary hit points every time you kill something, and that can kind of give you some more survivability. You're going to be kind of ride or die. You got to go and kill more people to get your health back, essentially, so that you can stay in melee combat. It's a really interesting and fun play style. And with the Hexblade, it's going to give you some armor proficiencies so that you can have a little bit better armor, and give you some more combat abilities to be able to do that melee fighting. And the reason I'm kind of locking you into that direction is
Right.
because of what you've said before. Like, yes, you could build an Eldritch Blaster. The third one that I will throw out is the Celestial Warlock. Has the ability to add your charisma modifier to a damaging cantrip that does fire or radiant damage, which your True Strike, at least at level 5, will be doing radiant damage. And so that could kind of be a cool way if you really want to be like one attack per round. I just go all out with this, cantrip, and I smite on it and do other stuff like that. Like, that could also be a fun route. What are you thinking? What do you like in there?
Yeah, I like the fiend route. I think we'll we'll move in that direction, because I think there's also like the fact that I don't know. I've not spent a ton of time in Warlock. I know Hexblade was definitely the bread and butter of 2014.
Yeah.
And in 2024, I think it's a little different, but yeah, we'll lean into the fiend aspect of things. Dig into that. I think the extra damage is just going to be very helpful. I think that also plays significantly more into the definitely takes my character into this like, oh, you went and talked to a demon. Okay.
Yeah. For sure. And I was kind of thinking the same thing too, of like, that already fits with a lot of your character concept. And not only that, you're going to have that ability. Now, I will say, if I were doing this and playing this character in game, I don't really see a world where I wouldn't take a first level dip in fighter. I know we're talking about multi-classing a little bit, but this again is one of those places where we want your character to be fun and to do what you want it to do. And you're playing a warlock, and you're wanting to use a sword and and spells and be kind of flashy and all that other stuff, but the warlock isn't going to get weapon masteries. It's not going to get a fighting style. It's not going to have it's not going to have armor proficiencies, and it's lacking even in certain weapon proficiencies. And so there's this place where it's like, oh, a big part of your chassis doesn't exist in the base class, and that's going to be one of those places where if you really wanted to do this, you're like, ooh, I feel like I'm lacking a lot of those things that I kind of need.
Right.
And so you could do a level dip into Paladin, but you got to be careful with, how much multi-classing, because again, remember, there's ability scores and everything. But you also could easily do a dip into Fighter, which is kind of one of the most accessible classes, and so you could get.
And Josiah is always going to dip into Fighter.
I always play Fighter.
And Fighter does this other really cool thing, which allows you to, when you make concentration checks to hold on to your spells that you've cast, you roll your Constitution. And if you're proficient with that, that's going to really help you keep your concentration. Right. And fighters have Constitution proficiency at the beginning of the game. So if you take that first level dip as a fighter, you're now set up. You have your defense, you have your weapon proficiencies, you have your, fighting style, and now you just go straight warlock. You're going to have a blast. It's going to be a really good build. You've shored up your defenses at the beginning. And I want to take just a small segment here to talk about that. that is the one thing where, like, there are certain classes where your class fantasy that you want to play nearly exists, and that is where I
So
really think
close.
multi-classing shines.
Mhm.
There's this place where it's like, hey, you want to do this, you got this warlock build, you got your subclass kind of picked out, you know the direction that you're going, but if you play this in game, you're really going to feel that only being able to wear light armor. You're really going to feel not having any weapon masteries. And you can fix that through feats, but you then are going to really feel not having the ability scores that you want improved. And so you can take that one level dip. It's not going to really set you back in any other way. It's just going to give you some of the things you need to really have the character that you've been thinking about in your head. And you might be like, well, how do I know when that's the case? And it's like, I can't totally tell you that. I guess the best I
Yeah.
could do is, like, the Dungeon Dudes have a lot of really good videos about this stuff. Colby from D&D Deep Dive has a lot of good videos about this stuff. Like, go watch a few videos specifically, and it doesn't have to take up all your time. Once you have an idea of, like, I want to play a warlock, you can go look and see, okay, like, what might the warlock be lacking? Specifically, I want to play a warlock with a sword, or a sword and shield, or a pole arm or something like that. What might they be lacking that I might need to shore up? Oh, you can compare them to the other martial classes that are going to be using that and say, they don't really have weapon proficiencies. They don't really have armor. I might want those things. And you can take that out of it. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right,
I think.
yeah,
Sorry, I was
yeah,
just gonna
jump
tag
in.
onto that. I think like a big thing here is like, obviously we're trying to do this kind of in like a podcast form, and so like, yeah, we know we have this foreknowledge of D&D, and if you don't have that, like, there are a ton of resources out there. It is okay to go, I very much use YouTube a lot, and I will just search like warlock builds, paladin builds. I did not like come to this knowledge overnight, and it just all like came into my mind, and now I'm awesome at D&D. I've been playing the game for a decade, and I have read through all of the rule books several times over. I've played a lot of D&D. I've seen a lot of people play different characters. And so if you're looking at, the player's handbook and you're like, this is a lot, I don't know where to start, go to YouTube, go to a bunch of these other resources.
Wiki dot.
Yeah. go to
And if you're
D&D
playing with
wiki
other,
dot.
if you are playing with other experienced players, go to them.
Yeah.
Say, hey, do you know? Like, I really want to play a charisma forward, sword and board type character, and I want them to kind of embody being flashy and still being a spellcaster. And they might be like, that sounds like a warlock. We can make that work, like, and help you with some of that stuff and say, hey, if you really want to make this fantasy work. Because, I mean, the easy solution is there is a place to be like, hey, I don't know how to make all this work. This is close enough. And in that case, I probably would have said, go with the Paladin. Play an Oath of Glory Paladin. It's close enough. I do think this Warlock is going to be even closer to the vision that you had. But if you don't know how to do all the little tweaks and everything, just go with the vanilla, closest you can get thing.
Right.
And maybe ask your DM to homebrew some stuff if it really doesn't fit exactly what you're wanting. That's okay. You can do that.
And some optimization you can do once the character's already built. You can definitely like adjust some of this as you go.
Yeah.
But some things you do kind of really want to know from the get-go. Whatever you take as your first level gives you different stats and abilities than you get at later levels. Your some of your proficiencies, I can't remember what all is different on that first level.
Your saving throws are going to be different on your
saving
first
throws.
level. So, for example, a fighter is strength and constitution. A wizard is going to be intelligence and wisdom. You're always going to get one of the like 3 primary ability scores of dexterity, wisdom or constitution, as those are the saving throws that you most often make in the game.
Right.
And you're never going to get 2 of those. You're only ever going to get 1 of those. And then you will also get some extra proficiencies depending on the class if you take it at first level instead of multi-classing into it at later levels.
Right.
And then you will get certain armor proficiencies if you start in a class. For example, if you multi-class into any class during your progression, you will never get heavy armor. It only ever gives you medium armor.
Yeah.
The only way to get around that is there are certain cleric subclasses and artificer subclasses that give you armor proficiencies when you get the subclass, therefore adding it in later. But for most of the time, you want to start with a class that's going to give you heavy armor proficiency if that's something you really care about, because that's how you're going to get that, and you won't be able to get that multi-classing into it later.
So all that to say, like, if it's worth thinking about some of these things from the get-go, because you might want to first level dip into fighter instead of trying to dip into it later.
Yeah. And we've really been trying to lean into being kind of newbie friendly here, especially as we're talking about character building, because if you already know all this stuff, you probably don't need us to explain it. And so we're trying to be helpful there. And honestly, if there's a place where you are already, 10 sessions deep into a campaign and realizing you've kind of trapped yourself out of what you're hoping to do, you can go talk to your DM and say, hey, would you be open to me retraining my character? Like, we could come up with a story reason for it, or we could just say, hey, like, this wasn't exactly what I wanted to play. This doesn't fit with the character I'm trying to portray in game. Can I switch it up a little bit? Can I take my, bard and change them to a paladin, because I think that's going to really fit better with what I'm trying to do here? And per the DM saying yes, that could be really helpful to you playing out the class fantasy that you and the character concept that you had from the beginning. All right, Josiah talked a decent amount, so we might have more to come back to with that. We also are running out of time here. But I want to hop over to Elijah here just to put some of the finishing touches. Specifically.
I can kind of jump ahead a little bit, because this one, it feels pretty obvious. I'm gonna go College of Lore Bard. I mean, I want to tell a lot of stories. I think that there are a lot of story elements in a lore bard of being able to take spells from another class. And like, maybe that's from, in this character's instance, like, I could even use that to kind of further the story of like, no, I learned about this great wizard who used this spell. And so now I also am like, oh, this is actually really useful. I would love to know how to use this spell.
For sure.
That kind of is, like, I'll say, the easy choice. And I think that because Bard as a class kind of covers my, I want to be a skill monkey. And it also kind of covers the, hey, it's a charisma based class. And so it covers the, hey, I'd like to do some a little bit of those social encounters, and that really kind of, I'm already shored up. And so I guess the cool thing about Bard for me there is I get to pick kind of how I want to play in combat, and I think that there are a lot of really cool things to do there, and so I think that, at least from my perspective, kind of really helps this episode a little bit of like, hey, Josiah is like, okay, I'm going to pick something that, like, my class really guides my character. And I'm like, my character has already been guided to, this is what your class is. And now I can use my class to kind of add to my gaming experience. And understand that, like, there are, you can do anything in Dungeons and Dragons, really. Like, there are very few limitations to, like, what your characters can do. And so we love using optimization to build characters and tell better stories this way. And so I think, at least from my perspective, it is a ton of fun to find both sides of this. Like, I enjoy building characters where it's like, I want to, like, my goal is to do this. And because my goal is to do this, I am going to pick this, and I'm going to try to optimize this way. And it's also a lot of fun to be like, all right, well, I am a wizard, and therefore I am a nerd. Let's run with that as a character.
Yeah. And I think specifically too, it's a lot of fun when your character concept so closely fits the character fantasy of a class. Like, yeah, it's fun to do something unique and unexpected, and part of that comes from we've played a lot of D&D already. We've done a lot of the kind of traditional tropes, and we're looking to subvert them a little bit. But there also is this place where it's like when your character fits the class you're playing, it feels really nice. It makes it easier to play that character. Your abilities seem to really fit what you're trying to do. Now, I threw out a multi-class option for Josiah's Warlock. I want to throw out a multi-class option that is going to help you play the fantasy that you had said for the Bard. Specifically, you'd said you really wanted to be a skill monkey. Now, the Bard is naturally a good skill monkey. It gets expertise. It gets quite a few skill proficiencies. But if you really wanted to lean into that, I think there is a class that gives you more skill stuff and also is really going to help you with some of your early game, as the Bard can be kind of weak in the early game. And that's Rogue. I think you could take, I've done a couple of multi-class builds with Rogue and Bard theoretically, and I see them being some of the strongest builds maybe out there even, just because both classes are incredibly versatile. You are going to be one of the best skill monkeys in the game with tons of expertise, tons of, like utility outside of combat and in social encounters. And then on top of all of that, you're going to have Rogue is really strong in the early game. It gets some nice damage boosts. And so you can start with a level or two there. You could go all the way up and get your subclass, but you're delaying a lot of the really powerful Bard features when you do that. But Bard is a late game powerhouse. And so to combine the strength of the early game Rogue with the strength of the late game Bard, it really ends up coming together well. And Bard is strong outside of that too, but when Bard gets magical secrets, they get to cast like anybody's spells, and that's a really strong feature, and that comes at level 10. So you don't really want to delay that a ton, but to help out with some of your early game, it can be really nice to take that, 1-2 level dip in Rogue and really focus on your skills. You're going to be really strong outside of combat with pretty much any skill challenge you come up against. You're going to have that little bit of a damage boost if you're doing True Strike, and you're going to get your sneak attack off whenever, party members in melee range, or you can get advantage. And, if you really wanted to, you could do that 2 level dip into Rogue to be able to hide and take the dash action and get out of, tricky situations, disengage, stuff like that.
Yeah. Right.
And I see that really adding to taking away some of the weaknesses you might feel really glaring in your game, and also add to the character concept of being a skill monkey and really strong with skills. What were you going to say, Josiah?
Yeah, I think it definitely can seem a little intimidating to hear us just like rattling off all of these like subclasses and class features. Like we have just like spent all of this time doing all of these things. Be like, oh, I don't, the things you're talking about seem like a lot of work. And I think for me, one of the most important things was literally like what we're talking about, saying, obviously with a little more time, of saying, okay, I want to be able to do this. How do I do that? And then reading through like, okay, what are the reading through the Warlock subclasses. Well, this does these things. Not exactly. Let me look at this one. And then going through like some of that, just picking up a player's handbook and reading it cover to cover is a lot of information that like you'll get a lot, but that's not how you get to the point where you're like, oh, I can take these different things and say, oh, this class would be helpful to put here. Oh, multi-classing this way would be really nice. Some of that really is just, okay, I know that I want to do more damage. I know that I want to get advantage on attacks, so I'm hitting more. I want to like make sure I have action economy. I want to make sure I'm using my bonus action. Some of those things are important, and I like want to do these things. This is how I'm going to be optimized. Oh, I want to make sure that I'm helping like, and reading through, well, this subclass gives me that ability. This class gives me this thing that is going to really help with that. Oh, I can get the Eldritchification that gives me the ability to see in the dark, and that can give me advantage. Well, let me pull that, and I'm going to multi-class this way in order to get that thing. Or oh, I can cast this spell for free once a day, and that's going to give me the ability to do this, and that's going to make combat easier, and some of those things. So it's not as much reading the knowing everything about D&D as much as it is saying, okay, I want to do this thing. I want to be better at this. I want that class fantasy of this. And then reading through some of those things and just doing some research to try to figure out that you get to know these things over time. It's not immediate.
Sure. And I want to say too, this was not, if you came away from this going, oh man, I don't feel like, yeah, I could do what they talked about in the podcast, but I couldn't go do this on my own. It's like, we weren't trying to make you feel overwhelmed or like you needed to be able to do this. Our main thing was to give you an example. And I think we did that. We took the characters that we built concepts around in the last podcast, and we took those and put mechanics around those to help those characters live out that concept that we'd come up with before in a world. And that was the point of this, is to give you some examples of what that could look like. We probably will go through and maybe talk about optimizing spells and what are good spells to take and other stuff like that. We probably will go through and talk about like multi-classing and say, hey, here's stuff that works well together. Here's stuff that doesn't. And you may be able to use those episodes as a resource when you're doing this to say, okay, what are they recommending? Because I'm thinking I want to do a fighter, but I really want them to be able to, you know, be in tune with nature. And it's like, well, you can play a Oath of the Ancients paladin, you can play a fighter druid multi-class, you could take it in a really different direction and you know, do a bard and lean into magical secrets and go that direction. You know, like you can achieve this class fantasy in different ways. And so we might have an episode coming in the future that really focuses more on those ideas and what, just giving you information and helping you learn how the system works. This was more to show you some of the theory and how to maybe do some of it. And so we hope that that was helpful. We hope it gets you started on the right track. We hope it points you towards the resources you need to be able to, you know, enjoy and live out the character concept and fantasy that you had in your head when you started designing this.
Yeah, we're gonna go roll for stats now.
So. we're gonna start playing these characters. No.
Yep.
All right. Well, this has been so fun. This is Tales About the Table, and we appreciate you joining us for another episode. And hopefully, this has been helpful. We don't have all the answers, but we love D&D, and we love to help people learn about this game and become better players. So, until next time, thanks and bye.
See you next Friday.